there. Great to see everybody.
It's great to see you too.
I'm in clinic today, so I can't stay too long, but I did just want to say I'm so excited for this session and glad we made this connection, and I'll stay on as long as I can.
Oh, that's great to have you with us, Hannah. I'd just like to let everybody know that the whole idea from this, for this meeting with Matt today was when we did our Recovery Reimagined conference at Trinity College last year. Anna joined us with Jo-Hanna Ivers from Trinity, who's also here with us. And she mentioned the Recovery First Ordinance and Matt. And did you know that the ordinance was signed on the 23rd of May, the same day we started the Recovery Reimagined Conference?
Oh, that's great. Great.
So cool. Synchronicity. Love it.
Dr. Lemke, thank you so much too for your support on the drug-free housing.
Oh, yes. You should tell them about that too. That's a very exciting initiative as well. You're doing such great work.
Fingers crossed. We'll see. It's going to be, the vote will be next week. It's going to be postponed 1 week.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, thank you all for coming today. This is the beginning of a new series that we're doing, Recovery Reimagined Circle Talks. And these will be held occasionally, probably once a month on a Tuesday. And they'll be free and open to all, an open Zoom. No need to register, just show up. We're glad to see you all showing up today and really appreciate it. So I'd like to introduce Supervisor Matt Dorsey, who's sitting beside me right here. He's invited me over to his office today. And Matt represents District 6 on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. That puts him right at the heart of one of the most complex drug crises of any city in the Western world. He is, I believe, the second member of the Board of Supervisors ever to come out as in recovery publicly. So that's a big plus for the recovery community to see somebody in his position do that. And last year, he championed legislation that made long-term recovery the official policy goal of San Francisco's entire approach to substance use. So before we get into all that, I'd like to start somewhere else. Oh, by the way, Professor Jo-Hanna Ivers is also with us from Trinity College Dublin, and she'll be joining us in a little later. I'm just going to start with a couple of questions from Matt, and then we'll bring Jo-Hanna in to talk about the policy part of all this. And she holds the only addiction-specific academic post in Ireland and leads the newly established Addiction Research Network Ireland. So we're delighted to have her with us today. So with that, Matt, I have to tell you, this is a bit of a full circle for me, because I came to San Francisco first as a wild Irish boy in 1978, and I fell in love with this city. But I won't get into the part of it that I fell in love with, because I don't partake in all that anymore. So, but I came back in 1988. I did a lot of geographics in between. And I came back in 1988, and I made this city my home for many, many years. And it was here in 1989 that I found recovery, the rooms of recovery, not far from where we're sitting right now, because I lived in the Tenderloin back then. And that was the era of crack cocaine, and that was what brought me into the rooms of recovery, that and alcohol. But as I've watched the city grow over the years, I've watched the streets change, I've watched the crisis deepen, watched fentanyl arrive and do what it has done. And I have to be honest, it's really been heartbreaking to watch all of that. But there's another thing I'd like to say is that watching the signing of the Recovery First legislation at Harbor Light down in the South of Market area here on the 23rd of May last year, that was one of the most hopeful things I've seen for a long time. Matt was there introducing all these wonderful people who are working in the field with people with lived experience and those supporting it. And it was really a large group effort. I'll put the video of that. I'll make sure that goes out on our WhatsApp groups and you all get it. And so before we get into the policy discussion, Matt, I just wanted to ask you, as one person in recovery to another, how did that day feel to you?
It was inspiring. I mean, I will tell you, as someone who sort of improbably found a political career as a recovering addict, asking for a job I never thought I would want, let alone have. What has inspired me so much in the last 4 years, and actually this week is the 4-year anniversary of me being appointed to the board. I feel like early on, somebody shouted at me across a store. I was going in to get a soda, and somebody had, "Dorsey!" And he pointed at himself to get, I got 6 years. And to watch people in the recovery community see me and know, and in fact, I actually heard from somebody that I went to a recovery meeting with regularly, who called me after he found out I was appointed, and it was more joy than I've ever heard in his voice. And we've watched each other go through hell and back. And he said to me, now we've got a seat at the table. And I still sort of get emotional thinking about that. But that day was just, it feels like the movement is building. I have said that to reporters and others, I sometimes think recovery is the new closet in politics, that people are coming out and finding a voice. And every time we have a press conference or something, we let people know that, hey, if you want to have your drug treatment program, come on out. We just had one for the drug-free supportive housing law that I'm proposing, and it was about 250 people, and it was just so moving. And I got to tell you, it was funny because at the end of, we're wrapping up the rally, and what better way to close a rally than with the wee version of the Serenity Prayer on the steps of City Hall. It was kind of like, it was just kind of punk rock, but it was, wow, was it moving? So that day was moving because I just am so inspired to see the recovery community finding a voice in this, at a time when it's needed.
Absolutely. So, I watched the video of the signing, and I'll make sure you all get that. And I didn't get the sense that this was like you were treating this like a political win. I felt like something completely different, something much more personal than that it was something from your lived experience coming from the heart. That's what I really felt with everybody that you introduced. You brought them all up to talk that day.
Yeah.
All of the people who are involved with these great initiatives that are going on here in San Francisco. You could really feel the energy. And so you've just alluded to that. That's what I got from it. I felt it too.
Yeah.
I got to tell you.
Yeah.
Because truly I love this city. And I spent about 33 years living in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And really, I love the recovery community here. I always have, saved my life. So I want to just really say thank you.
Oh, great.
And with that, I would like to introduce Jo-Hanna Ivers, who's here. Jo-Hanna runs the addiction MSc in recovery studies, not addiction studies only, but recovery studies at Trinity College, Dublin, and also involved in some great initiatives in Ireland, and which are one of them I mentioned, the recently established Addiction Research Network Ireland. And Jo-Hanna, it's great to see you, and I really want to thank you for coming along today. And I'll turn it over to you and Matt to have the discussion. And
thanks for having me, Patrick. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to get the opportunity to talk with Matt. I think you mentioned it a second ago. We're going through a bit of a transformation in Ireland with our own drugs policy. So at the moment, like many other European cities and the US, we were predominantly running with policies that were very much based around harm reduction. And we've made some wonderful achievements in terms of harm reduction. But I suppose the criticism, so where we're at, Matt, at the moment is that we have people who won't necessarily push against recovery in terms of politics, but won't come out swinging for it. So it's in that space where, nobody's kind of blocking it, but at the same time, we're lacking advocates and visible people in our political system like yourself. So thank you so much for the work that you do. And about 10 years ago, it was the first time in our last drug strategy, was the first time that recovery was ever mentioned, but it is only in name, and we still had these very woolly aspirational statements around recovery. So open up recovery to more communities or build recovery champions. So it was kind of a scene to be doing, but no actionable points. And so one of the things that we talk about is, you know, the bread and butter of implementation science is about, isn't it? It's about holding someone accountable. It's about naming an office that the book ends with, resourcing it, and giving an adequate timeline for us to see some level of success. And when we looked at our harm reduction actions, we had that in spades. So you had things like drug checking services, we had the naloxone program, the court diversion. But then when we came to recovery, we had these broad statements around support, but no real actionable pieces. And I suppose one of the areas that we're lacking in, well, Ireland's having a homeless crisis anyway, just to compound issues, but we don't have any, I suppose, recovery housing that has a program behind it. So things like Oxford Housing and other kind of recovery models like that. Again, we have these ill-fitting kind of practices like, you know, housing first. So housing first is obviously going to work for a certain amount of people under certain conditions, but that's been branded as our approach to recovery housing. And I suppose what we really need to do, and what Ireland could greatly learn from, is this cross-sectoral piece where you've come out and actually called out an action. And I suppose I'd love to know from you, Patrick will kill me. He said everybody has to make their question really succinct, and here I am giving a TED talk, so sorry for that. But I suppose it's trying to learn, you know, what was the first step in you taking this as an action and making it actionable, if you like?
Well, there's since I was appointed, I was appointed because my predecessor was elected to the state assembly. Let me take a couple minutes just to sort of explain that most of my career I've been behind the scenes in local government. I never had an aspiration to be a politician. I was working for the police department during COVID. I've spent most of my adult life in recovery, and I have had good stretches of sobriety, but I've had 8 years and then a relapse. I've had some setbacks along the way, including one in 2018, 2019, that was probably the worst time that I've ever had. After that, I went to work for the police department. During COVID, I actually had a relapse. And when someone, for me, as somebody who's had success in recovery for a while, it starts getting into my head that maybe recovery doesn't work on me anymore. And the day that I asked the mayor to consider me as an appointment to the Board of Supervisors, I made clear that this is what I was going to try to lead on. And that I, as a person in recovery, a recovering drug addict, I could speak to what we're experiencing in this city, which is the worst public health crisis since AIDS when it comes to the loss of life. I could speak to it in a way others couldn't. But I also had to acknowledge to the mayor of San Francisco that literally on the day I was having this conversation with her, I was celebrating 18 months of sobriety. I didn't have enough continuous sobriety to qualify as a treasurer in the 12-step program. And I was asking her to put me in charge of a $16 billion budget. and I had to own it. And I just said, Mayor, no hard feelings if the answer is no. But this is personal to me in a way nothing in politics has ever been personal. So there's a number of policies that we set out to implement. We've got a Read to Recovery program that gives away free recovery literature from all recovery traditions in all published languages, in all branch libraries. It's actually now considered a national model. We've got a program called Cash Not Drugs, which is for people who are on general assistance, that they can get a sobriety and recovery bonus of up to $100 per week if they have a negative drug test. It is also structured in a way that it rewards, it'll be $25 the first week as a bonus to their regular cash grant, and it will go up to $100 to reward long-term sobriety. What I was seeing in the policy realm in San Francisco is there was really a focus on harm reduction, and it was a focus that I think was losing public support. And one of the things that I felt needed to be done and why I authored legislation called the Recovery First Ordinance. It was actually modeled on something San Francisco did 4 or 5 decades ago called Transit First. When it was just a policy that, we're as a city, we're going to try to develop this city in a way that encourages people to use transit. What I wanted to do with Recovery First was just to have a policy North Star for all of our interactions on drug policy across all of our departments. That the one thing they should all have in common is we are trying to get people off of drugs. That the primary goal of all drug policy in the city and county of San Francisco is a healthy, self-directed life free of illicit drug use. That was surprisingly more controversial than one would have thought. We got there, but I will say the point that I was making was I am watching people in San Francisco lose the confidence of their government because they're seeing people diminish and die before their eyes in their neighborhoods, 2 people per day, many of them young people. And the idea that our response is, here's a fresh meth pipe and it's all harm reduction. And I want to make clear, I'm for harm reduction. But what I said was, when San Francisco's drug policy aligns with what any of us would wish for a loved one struggling with addiction, then we will have a drug policy worthy of the city of St. Francis. That's what the Recovery First Ordinance meant to do. And I'm grateful we got it across the finish line. So I think it doesn't have teeth as a law, but as a political effect, I think it's highly influential that now everybody knows that this is what we're working towards. So yeah, we're going to give out clean needles, but we're also going to be making sure people have the information and encouragement to get into recovery and do everything we can to keep them there.
Thank you. And I suppose, congratulations again on your journey in, and as I say, that level of visibility. And I suppose we've seen these aspirational things, as I said, in Ireland, where we know that we have to make this cross-sectoral. And as you say, the partners have to be there. But how do you sway people in housing, let's say, or education to kind of adapt those kind of programs? And what is the starting point there? I mean, I know you've got your office and you've got the support of that, but the on the ground, is it mandated? What is your starting point for ensuring that we have recovery in all policies?
What I am doing right now, I have legislation that is before the Board of Supervisors that is called expanding drug-free supportive housing. And basically it is taking our housing first model for permanent supportive housing in San Francisco. And it is requiring that all city-funded permanent supportive housing, which is not subject to the state restrictions on sort of the drug-tolerant housing first rules, we can use our local dollars to have a drug-free version of supportive housing where the use of illicit drugs would be grounds for eviction. Obviously, people would be offered relapse support. Nobody's being evicted to the street, but the understanding would be that this is a category of permanent supportive housing for people who want to live in a drug-free environment. I want to make an important distinction too, because there's a lot of conflation around sober housing, recovery housing, and drug-free housing. This is drug-free in the sense that it's illicit drug-free. But if you want to drink alcohol or smoke marijuana, provided it's legal, you can do that. And the reason that was actually an easier lift legally is because in San Francisco, we have 240,000 residential standard leases that have that same exact provision. The illegal drug use in a residential lease setting is grounds for eviction. Usually the standard would be substantially disruptive to the well-being of the community, or interfering with what's called the doctrine of quiet enjoyment, that everybody has the right to the quiet enjoyment of their residence. That's where sometimes there will be evictions for people who are engaging in public drug use. The good news with permanent supportive housing is we have plenty of drug tolerant options if people don't want to be in a drug free environment. But what I'm hearing from a lot of people is they want a drug free environment. So the legislation that I've got before the board would be prescriptive for city dollars. Basically, it would take the position that if city funding for permanent supportive housing can be used for drug-free housing, it shall be used for drug-free housing. And that's how we're going to build the portfolio to make sure that we're meeting the demand of what people want. There's two other options, aspects of that legislation. It will require that we do a survey of people who live in permanent supportive housing buildings and ask them what they would prefer. One thing that has bedeviled a lot of the policy discussions at the state level, and my predecessor, Assemblymember Matt Haney, is carrying legislation for recovery housing, which is a more therapeutic model. But they've had a lot of debates at the state level about whether it should be a 25%, allocation or 10%, and it keeps getting negotiated down. What I was saying when we were drafting my legislation was, we don't have to guess, we can ask. And maybe it's a good idea to put what residents of permanent supportive housing want at the center of what we're delivering. And then it will also create a policy within our permanent supportive housing framework that over time, San Francisco will endeavor to meet the demand of what our permanent supportive housing residents want. I hear from a lot of PSH residents that they want a drug-free option. So we will see, but I think it's going to be a close vote. This is not going to be unanimous. If I can get this through the Board of Supervisors, it's going to be with the bare minimum of 6 votes, I fear. And if I can't get it through, I'm taking it to voters. So I'm committed to, this is not one I'm not going to give up on. I'm not going to give up on.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your commitment to it. But I suppose in terms of if it doesn't go over the line now, what is the next option then for you? How do you get around that then?
In California, we have pretty liberal rules about taking things to the ballot. This is from the 19th century. The way that our charter is written, me and 3 of my colleagues could just by signature put something on the November ballot. So we would have to draft the legislation in a way that it's going to voters. I will say I have done polling on this. Back in December, we wanted to see if this was something we would want to take to voters. There is a lot of public support for this. I think most people don't realize what housing first means. At least in California, what it means is the use of illicit drugs on site shall not be grounds for eviction, and that drug use and addiction shall be treated as part of people's lives and addressed non-judgmentally. I think that's fine for some people, but it's not fine for everyone. And I certainly hear from a lot of people, as the out and proud in recovery, former drug addict supervisor, I hear from a lot of my brothers and sisters in recovery, and I hear them asking for they want this option.
And you made the distinction between, the definitions around recovery housing, sober housing. In terms of your bill then, are you getting into the weeds in terms of the programs that will support people behind that? Or is it just as simple as having houses that are abstinence based, or what will be the support behind that then?
Yeah, so we actually decided, I've been working on this legislation for close to 2 years. And we had iterations of it that were going to create 3 different models, which would be sort of a traditional drug tolerant housing first. You can't be evicted for using illicit drugs. A drug-free option. Sometimes in California, we call it California sober. California sober is when the people, hey, God love them. I wish I was one of them. Where you can drink your beer and smoke your pot, and as long as you're not using hard drugs, you're good. That would be the traditional standard residential lease in California and in San Francisco by definition. And then we would have a recovery supportive version that would align with HUD guidance from the Obama administration And the Biden administration issued guidance under the framework of Housing First for how recovery housing would work through SAMHSA. I will say this whole policy realm is a bit of a moving target because the state legislature is opening up the hood on Housing First. I was citing federal documentation in some of my legislation, and at a time when the Trump administration is literally pulling it off the federal website. So I can't, it was interesting that it was actually becoming more complicated to legislate the recovery-oriented piece of it, the more therapeutic models. And if you're familiar with the National Association of Recovery Residences, they have four different NAR has four different levels of recovery residences that go from sort of self-governing Oxford House, it's mostly the community governing itself, up to and including sort of more therapeutic, medically sort of staffed models. I hope that we do that, and I am encouraging the Lurie administration to do it. But ultimately, we decided that the path of least resistance, at least to get started, was to start with a drug-free supportive housing option that, even if it's not going to specifically serve people who are in recovery, I will tell you, having talked to a lot of people who are in recovery and right now living in drug-tolerant models, being in a drug-free environment would be miles ahead of where they are now. And I hear that from a lot of people. Even if they're not getting, if they have to go do their own meetings and find their own support where it's not specifically geared, the supportive services aren't specifically geared toward recovery, being in an environment where there isn't, meth use in the hallways and a lot of the disorder that's playing out in these buildings would put them in a better position and set them up for success.
And I suppose that important differentiation of just asking the people, as you say, here's the dollars, how do you want it spent in terms of your needs? Yeah. It's quite simple, but brilliant as well.
Can I mention, there's one thing I would mention too, because this came up yesterday. We had a press conference with Assemblymember Matt Haney about his recovery housing legislation. And there was a point that I made there that I think is one that we as recovery advocates should be making to policymakers. The benefit of having people from the recovery community involved in this issue is that as policymakers, we have our strongest ally in the recovery community itself. We are excellent at providing support for one another, and taxpayers don't pay a dime for this. The recovery community is a force multiplier for what we are trying to solve for in our drug crisis. And even if you are a fervent harm reduction fundamentalist and that's your belief, I will tell you right now that we're going to save a lot of money getting people into the arms of a recovery community that will support one another, because that is free of taxpayer dollars. We do that for free because we get to keep our sobriety by giving it away. So that's an ethos that I think pervades not just 12-step programs, but Life Ring Secular Recovery and Recovery Dharma. Every recovery program I've ever encountered really is based in this ethos of supporting one another and having the hand of recovery be there. From the standpoint of a policymaker, it's important to understand that in many ways, harm reduction, while I support harm reduction, it's keeping our best ally on the sidelines, and that's the recovery community. If we can get people into the arms of the recovery community, we're going to have a very strong ally and a very strong force multiplier for the dollars we're spending.
Yeah, and I think that at least in Ireland, we have pivoted towards that, and there's a massive recognition, as you say, if you're lucky enough, like we are, to spend time in recovery communities, that civic engagement, that paying it forward is quite visible. And as you say, it's an untapped resource. And I think that we've at least shifted towards recognizing the value of that in Ireland. But just on your point then, obviously you've got your own experience, but was there the bringing in of other community members in recovery to help you shape and develop the work that you were doing, and what did that look like?
There was a line that I heard from a New York Times reporter who said to me, quoting a clinician, that you know what they say, you've met one addict, you've met one addict. It was a kind of interesting, as somebody who is now a policymaker in the recovery and drug policy realm, it's reinforcing what I have experienced for many years of going to recovery meetings. We may have similarities, but everybody's journey is different. And what works for one person may not work for another. What worked for me 10 years ago may not work for me now. You know, like I may need something that's more structured or less structured. So I think what I have gotten from the people who are engaging on this as a matter of public policy is a real commitment to making sure that we've got options for people. And I think this is coming up in the context of Housing First. Housing First is a one-size-fits-all drug-tolerant model that serves everybody, and that's not serving everybody well. And that's where I feel like we're having a little debate about the reason we need a drug-free option is because it is an option. And we should enable people who are trying to do right, find their own way, who may be in difficult situations where they're exiting homelessness. Many of folks are trying to either get or stay sober. Sometimes, we should give them the option to be in a drug-free place. So the engagement that I have had from people in the recovery community is to really double down on the importance of making sure that we're doing everything to support options and to look wherever there are obstacles to recovery. We need to identify those obstacles and eliminate them. And that was part of the thinking behind the Recovery First ordinance. Listen, if we can give out clean needles and meth pipes and harm reduction supplies, we can give out recovery books too. And sometimes a $25 book is a barrier for somebody to really get the most out of their recovery. Another thing that we're working on right now, that I'm working on with Mayor Lurie's administration, is we're trying to expand capacity for a drug treatment kennel and foster care program for pets, because one thing that we're seeing a lot of is when people are ready, they don't have the ability for anybody to take care of their pet for 30 or 60 or 90 days. If we could provide, an option, we got you on this. We'll find either someone to foster or a kennel or some kind of situation. San Francisco I always say this, San Francisco, you'll never go wrong understanding that San Francisco is literally the city of St. Francis, especially when it comes to our animals. Mm-hmm. So, I think there will be a lot of people who would be willing to step up. We're working with the Animal Care and Control and the San Francisco SPCA on it. So that is one other piece of legislation that I'm working on. And then there's one other program, and I don't know that I'm hopefully this may be a sort of something for my second term, but I want to have a program that provides a basic income for anybody who finishes successfully a drug treatment program in San Francisco that would partner people with job training or workforce development. We have a lot of those programs in San Francisco, but if the city could fund just a minimum wage basic income that would be conditional on successful, drug-free drug testing. But the program is called Sober New Deal. And I think it's important that we do everything we can to help people who are ready to get into recovery and support them there, and then support them through early sobriety.
Excellent. So when you talk about that as your next initiative, where is that at the moment?
So right now right now we have a budget deficit that is closing in on $750 million. So it's a bad time to be talking about it. I'm learning that right away, that there's going to be some obstacles, because a basic income program, if we were just to say, it's a significant expense. It may be something that we have to start as a pilot program. I think I'm working with the Department of Public Health, and they are exploring whether we could use some of the state funding for drug treatment programs for this kind of program. For those are people here familiar with contingency management and what that is? Contingency management is a program it's similar to what I talked about with Cash Not Drugs. It's a program that rewards people for a negative drug test. It's a carrot, not a stick approach. And the studies I have read of it suggest that it really is a very effective approach, especially for methamphetamine for whatever reason. It's just, I think it might be just because we don't have, that's my drug of choice. We don't have medications like buprenorphine or anything for a lot of stimulant use disorders. What we do have is contingency management programs that reward people for good behavior and give them a little gift card or pay them a little money. I would like to really expand that and go big. San Francisco is a wealthy city, and I will just completely, I will never stop believing that sobriety and recovery is a very good investment. We can get people into recovery and to stay there over the long term. We'll make money on the taxes and everything else. So it's like, I have a lot of confidence in the success of people once they find their way.
Oh, absolutely. And as you say, it is speculate to accumulate. You give small and you gain back big. But I'm very interested in the second piece really requires a lot of, or the second initiative around the building up of those work skills and that entry into the workforce. That really requires investment. Whereas if what you've done is you've broadened the menu of choice in terms of the housing. And so is there any leverage that you've got in your system already? You talked about contingency management, but is there work-based programs for people coming from treatment anyway, or is that a new development?
There are a lot of them. And actually, one of the things that I've said about Sober New Deal, and we had a meeting with the Director of Public Health and the Mayor's Chief Policy person on this, in this policy realm. We just talked about this yesterday. And one of the things that I said is, Sober New Deal shouldn't be reinventing the wheel on job training and workforce development and many of the programs that we have. And in fact, many departments have their own. So we have a construction training program because we got to build a lot of housing in this city and we need people, and that's an industry that is really accepting of people who are coming out of drug treatment programs. And but we have culinary arts. We have there are so many workforce development programs that we have. I don't want to sort of give some requirement on them where we have to manage them. Those are options that are available. Where I think the city has a role to play is we have the ability, if with our resources, to make sure that we're going to pair this with a basic income. That, listen, this is going to be, maybe you don't need it, but if you do, you can sign up for Sober New Deal. And for maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's 6 months, and maybe it's just minimum wage, but it'll be 40 hours a week and there'll be an expectation of some accountability with our workforce development partner or even educational partner. I mean, I know that, for example, there is a treatment-related nonprofit called Health Right 360, and they're focused a lot on doing everything they can to build the pipeline of drug treatment counselors that we desperately need. And I will say, as a 3-time drug rehab graduate myself, I often feel bad for the normies who go into this work because I feel like we addicts can sniff them out. I think the best treatment counselors I've ever had, the people who really made a lasting impact on me, are the people who have been through it. And I think for many of the people who are coming out of recovery and finding success there, listen, if you want to decorate cakes, we got you. If you want to build a house, we got there. There's a lot of options, but one thing we really need right now is we need drug treatment counselors. And I would say this isn't just unique to San Francisco. I think this is what major cities are going to have to deal with in the 21st century. Today, we are in the synthetic drug era. And the reality is we're facing new and more difficult and more deadly challenges than we've ever faced in human history. That means we've got to make demand-side interventions that are better and more consequential. I think the success of cities is going to depend in the years ahead on who's doing a good job of preventing drug use or drug addiction, and then helping people get on the other side of their addictions and get into recovery once they're there. And I don't know if Dr. Lemke is still on this call, but I will say I read her book, Dopamine Nation. And there's a line in it that it just really resonated with me, that if you haven't found your drug of choice yet, it's coming soon to a website near you. And I think that's a wake-up call for those of us who are policymakers, that we may have a generation of people who are dealing with non-substance related addictive disorders. I think we recognize Gamblers Anonymous as sort of the granddaddy of those, but we don't know what social media is going to hold, and online gaming and Twitch and all this stuff. But I think we're going to see a lot of people who are going to need our help as policymakers and as public health professionals and advocates. What we're doing here to get and to stay sober is going to have applications for leading cities and governments in decades to come. So I think we're doing important work.
Oh, you're doing tremendous work. One thing that I'm always fearful of is that people write these things off to luck. And of course, there's an element of luck and right place, right time. But again, if you were harnessing a how-to for another country, how can Ireland learn from your office, and how can we create champions or space for champions like yourself and advocates? Because I'd hate for people to think, oh, it's all just about luck and we can't actually shape this.
I would say that all drug addicts should run for public office. I will say this. I don't know how familiar you are with Harvey Milk. He was the gay supervisor from the groundbreaking. He was the supervisor in San Francisco. I sit at Harvey Milk's desk in the Board of Supervisors chambers, and I didn't know he was before my time, but his campaign consultant was a mentor to me when I arrived in San Francisco 35, 40 years ago. At that time, Harvey Milk was adamant that everybody has to come out of the closet. What will change this movement is visibility. And I have really felt in these last 4 years being out and proud about being a person in recovery, and speaking to, even asking, well, what drugs did you do? And I'm just going to own it. It's scary. It's vulnerable. There really isn't a playbook to run for public office as a recovering addict. But I will say that the recovery community itself is kind of a sleeping giant, and certainly the people who have loved ones who are in recovery, or people who have loved ones who they want to get into recovery, or loved ones who didn't find recovery in time. When you add that up, everybody in politics is rooting for us. So I think visibility is really important. If there are people out there, it's also, I will say, it's kind of an opposition researcher's nightmare when you're trying to run a negative campaign against somebody who's already owned all his drug. I don't know how much more negative you can go. So my experience was interesting, but I didn't know how people were going to react. What I found was that people, by and large, not all of them, but by and large, were rooting for me, and they're rooting for us in the community. And then I think just making sure that people find a voice. As I said, recovery is the new closet. What the gay community sort of coming out and being proud was to Harvey Milk a generation or two ago. I'm seeing that now in San Francisco, that people come out to rallies. And in fact, there's a couple of drug treatment programs in the city that they bring newcomers to their program to the rally. And it's amazing to watch young people who are in recovery. This may be the first meeting they've ever been to. And they're looking at an elected official who's on the steps of City Hall, and they're looking at old timers and people who have had success in this. And we're fighting for each other on the steps of City Hall and changing policy and changing lives. That's really inspiring. And it inspires me to see what it means to young people who get to be a part of this.
Matt, I really want to thank you,
Well, thank you.
It's inspiring what you're doing. And look, you're inspiring us all. So,
Well, I'm inspired by everybody here who is doing this work. It really is important. You know, one thing I will tell you, when I was going through the process of considering whether I should ask for this job, and like I said, I never wanted to be a politician. I worked for politicians. That's kind of what I did. Um, there was a meeting that I went to every month when I was working for the police department during COVID. And it was a Zoom call to preview the monthly report on how many people died of drug overdoses the month before. And month after month, in early sobriety myself, by the way, you know, with my own thing. And it was complicated because when you relapse, I was a civilian member of the police department command staff, and it turns out police departments don't like active drug users on their command staff. So, but month after month, I was in that meeting, and month after month, I looked at a number that was consistently twice as deadly as COVID, and a number that is something that I'm one bad decision away from being in. And that was the thing that really just resonated with me. And it reminds me that the work that we're doing for ourselves and for each other has never been more important than it is right now. We're just in a time when there are new, deadlier, more potently addictive, more profitable drugs. And we're all going to be facing challenges personally and as governments, as we, you know, for those of us who are policymakers and those of us who are just trying to stay sober for our own purpose. The work we're doing is really important. And I'm just grateful that I get to be, I'm grateful for having a recovery community that's there for me in so many ways.
Well, we're grateful for you, man.
Okay.
Definitely. Jo-Hanna, would you like to say anything to take us out?
Well, just to reiterate what people are saying, it's incredible to see someone like yourself, Matt, championing this work. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to speak directly to you and to listen for your work, about your work. So thank you so much. Thank you, Patrick, for the invitation, and thank you to
my
Anna
pleasure.
as well.
Anna, you know, you inspired me to get in touch with Matt, so maybe ask you to unmute and.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so inspired listening to Matt. I think it's, I don't know, I feel kind of a renewed sense of, yeah, being part of a very purposeful, meaningful movement. You know, one of the things I sometimes say is that addiction is the modern plague, and that people in recovery are modern day prophets. Because they've been forced to acquire a certain wisdom to survive in this crazy world. So yeah, I mean, the power of the community is sort of what I'm hearing, and I love the idea also of being open. You know, being open in recovery and how important it is for people in prominent positions and public-facing positions to be open in recovery. You know, we talk so much about destigmatizing, but as long as we sort of have these shadow clinics and shadow infrastructure for people in recovery, and people aren't just coming out saying, yeah, you know, I have this disease and it's called addiction. And, you know, even if you don't like the disease conceptualization, like diseasifying things is how we care for them now. If they don't get that, they don't get resources and to help other people. So, yeah, I think coming out, being proud in recovery, conceptualizing the disease model, conceptualizing our environment as a drugified environment that makes us all vulnerable, you know, and really being inspired by the community. So I love your message. I'm newly inspired today. I'm like, oh, this is great.
Oh, that's great. That means a lot.
And it means a lot. Anna, you know, you were the first academic that I reached out to 5 years ago. I think, or 5 or 6 years ago, and you came along and talked to us, you know.
Was it that long ago? It seems like yesterday.
It seems like, yeah. And Anna's joined us a few times, and she joined us in Dublin. So that meant a lot to me and to us as a community, Anna.
Oh,
and of
good.
course, your books have helped so many people.
Thank
and your
you.
work is inspirational. So thank you, Anna.